Great. Happy Tuesday, September the 14th, 8 a.m. for us over here, Pacific time. Thanks everybody for joining us in. As we did 2 weeks ago, we're doing this as the same agenda in 2 different time slots today. So this same agenda will happen again in a few hours. If you can't make both, that's totally fine. We'll jump through our notary governance meeting. We've adjusted the planned agenda just a little bit to bring client presentations up. We have some large data set clients here that want to share their applications. So first we'll run through some metrics, touch on that, and then talk about some discussions. Put air quotes around that because we're using the actual discussions feature in GitHub, introduce that. Deep and I are going to talk about some things from the summit that we had last week, share out some 6-month program goals, show some of the new LDN tools, and then have time for an open discussion, at which point I think we'll also hear from Eric regarding a great fit that he has proposed. So that's the agenda. Kicking it off, we learned just a flash 30 minutes ago that a number of web services are currently down, including Interplanetary Dashboard and Space Gap. We grabbed these screenshots from yesterday, but if you go check the dashboard right now, it was still down. So working on getting that fixed. We were able to update how it is scraping and calculating to get away from, as happy as we were to see that 18-minute average time to DataCap, we're back at what we think is a more accurate 7 days average overall time to DataCap. We have seen a decrease in average time to first response from Notary, which is phenomenal, and time to DataCap allocated on chain, slight change by a few hours, but still looking at that 12-day mark. So metrics still continuing to go down. This is one that we're happy to see decrease. We really want to keep driving these as far down as possible. We have some ideas about that. Looking at the allocation funnel, again, this is still taking in large data set notaries as well, which is part of the reason we're at 36 petabytes, because it is counting each of those, for example, 5 petabytes to an LDN. Breaking that down to clients, we're at 1.9 petabytes. That's made it out the door to clients, which is phenomenal. And an increase from where we were, we're at 0.75 petabytes sealed in deals. So seeing this continue, looking at direct notary activity, as of yesterday, there were 57 open issues in the client onboarding repo. 13 of those were new. Some of those are duplicates, people submitting to multiple notaries. We have 185 closed and granted issues and 22 in the last 14 days, which is great. We've seen an increase in the average clients per notary, again, excluding the auto verifier that's now at 441 clients. And fantastic work from our auto verifier. It's really working hard. Looking at some of our latest data set metrics, we did get an update yesterday to change the naming for the LDNs. So that's exciting. Hopefully this helps make it a little bit more clear when you're looking at that notary dashboard. So we're going with this formatting of LDN 1 because this was issue number 1, and then the project and an affiliated organization. So for example, LDN 22 with Internet Archive. At this point, we're seeing 21 total client applications with 54 petabytes of DataCap requested in summation per all of those. Breaking down that funnel a little bit of the client applications that have been approved and started to allocate, we have 742 petabytes out to clients, specifically with large data sets. And from there, 174 petabytes sealed in deals. So pretty happy metric count. From that, I'm gonna pause and stop sharing my screen and kick it over to one of our guest clients.
Okay, so I guess that's my turn now. So greetings. I'm not sure how many of you have seen my application. So I'm applying as for, okay, let me share the screen of the slides that I've made up. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, so how's the screen looking? I'm not sure how this is.
Yep, you can get.
Okay, so it's
see your
good.
slides.
So my name is Johnson Yu, representing from the NHN KCP Corporation of the Korea. So just brief introduction about our company. So we are the company that's serving the payment gateway and PSP service in Korea at the moment. So we do have the market share of #1 payment gateway service in Korea. We have been operating in Korea for 20 years now, and we are part of one of the Korea's largest IT company called NHN Corporation, which has now more than like 102 subsidiary companies, including us, and e-wallet companies, e-commerce, some like streaming service and IT and cloud service, data service, and all the fintech service that offers in Korea. So NHN is definitely one of the biggest IT or corporation in Korea. So which has subsidiaries in Singapore, Japan, and other countries, including NHN KCP ourselves. We also have our subsidiary companies in Singapore, so NHN KCP PT, and also we have run the joint venture with the SKT from Korea and also Thailand's national telecom company called Tripay. So we have been operating that company for about 7 years as well. So I've been in Thailand and working for them for far more than 5 years, and I just came back to Korea. Okay, so this is just brief introduction of our customers. So we serve payment service for like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Dyson, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, and all the top companies in the world. So which we are serving for providing the local payment processing for them. So that's one of our key jobs. We serve our payment service for e-commerce, some O2O, retails, fashion, and every company. So these three sections are our major business, which is the payment gateway service, and also the value addition network service, which is providing network for between the issuers, acquirers, merchant, and the card companies in Korea. And the fintech service, including like white labeling service, and also because our parent company is running one of the biggest e-wallet and data platform called Payco. So we are serving some data analysis service for them as well. And so this is just brief, just explanation of our market share. So we are definitely one of the top market share of the companies in Korea, which has around 200 PSP companies registered in Korea. So it's just top three, us and LG TOS and Initius, those three dominating the market about 70% at least. So that's the PSP market share in Korea. And our continued sales are growing quite rapidly. So when I first joined the company in 2014, our rank was about #4. But now we have grown extremely fast since last 4 years, starting with Apple. So we have started acquiring a solo for Apple for about 3 years now. And after we started Apple, a lot of the top players came for us as a reference, like we've been processing Tesla, Google, Amazon, and all the big names that helped us to grow quite fast in Korea. So now we became #4 with around less than 10% when I first joined this company. And now we're dominating with more than 25% of the market share. Our credit ratings are perfectly well. We have all the security certificate like PCI DSS, ISMS, and all this license that is required to operate in Korea. So that's the general introduction about our company first. So is there any question about our company if you'd like to ask?
Does anybody have any questions? Johnson, are you planning to present more material, or do you want to field all the questions now?
I'll just briefly explain what I'm going to do for it as well. So there was just brief introduction of our company, and one of the things that I'm building and planning is because it's quite big thing in Korea, all the big data, blockchain technology, machine learning, and data stuff. They are supporting a lot of the companies to start those business within Korea and expand to the world. So there are a lot of the governments that's providing all this data for free, so they can support and even pay for you, so you can make business of yourself. So there's a lot of supportive programs that I can get some decent data and stuff. And because we are like a fintech company of doing payment processing, I always thought it will be a lot of thoughtful if we can utilize those data and gather some big data and provide those marketing and the service to the customer. So I was planning to, because we have all the data processing ourselves, because we have been operating Korea for more than 20 years now. We have all the customers like payment behaviors, geological behaviors, and all the stuff. And if we can utilize that and the public data, like all the GPS information and how density of those like commerce population is from those images and videos the government provides, and all this, like also not just the government, each state provide their own data, like the increased number of like cafeteria in 10 years and some increase of density in the area for last like 5 years, and how it's increasing, how many merchants are getting used. So I want to utilize all this data and provide a service for potential like SMEs. Like SMEs that does not have money to get the data from like a Nielsen and all this research. So, and those who cannot do on their research by moving into all this area. Like for example, if I want to run like an open new cafe in some Jeju Island in Korea, and I want to know who my competitor is, I want to know how actively commerce the market is, how many people are making payments per day, like how many cars, how many people are passed in one day. Like I'll need to know all what's the data, so I can choose where to pick the spot that I want to run all those cafes in. So those are the data that I want to gather and process, and those provide service for free for our potential customers. So they can use all our data for free, and trying to persuade them to use our service for their payment system. So that is my ultimate goal. So I want to gather all this information and store in the system, and I want to build some data analytic programs using the data deployment and get all this data from like a public, government, university, everywhere that I can publicly get the data that can be revealed to public. So those are the just things that I want to do. So examples I've been choosing. This is like the mock-up for the system that I'm planning now. So customers can, because at the first we won't be able to have too many data. We'll have to rely on some data that actually like governments and university provide. So we want to build a platform that the potential customer can upload where they want to get the data analysis. So they the place they are uploading themselves, like some pictures, images, some Excel data or videos. So they can upload themselves and ask us to evaluate the data, and we will evaluate and compare with the database of ourselves and compare with all the other reasons and how those markets are, like how competitive those area is and all the stuff. So this is the example. So I want to know the section of this. So if I upload some video or image of those subsections, so I want to build a system that can analyze by titles and make the useful informations to them. So that's pretty much the big picture that I'm planning now, which is in build. And I was looking because one of the key issue that I've been facing this was, I've been actually planning this for quite a long time, maybe 2 years ago since I was in Thailand. And one of the key challenge was that because if I want to store all this data into like Amazon AWS, it's really expensive. Like it is almost impossible to provide these information for customers for free. But I've been looking for like some IFS subsystem like Filecoin Plus, and I thought it was a great chance. If we can utilize those, it will be quite cost efficient and it will be much easier for me to offer this build and offer this service to our customers as a public benefits. So I guess that's pretty much my general introduction about my company and also my project as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I just wanted to open up the floor to any questions that people have, especially notaries, or if there's any notaries that are interested in showing support for this application. I definitely have some questions in terms of like utilization of like Filecoin and like your general strategies for onboarding like this data. It looks like I see the whole like failover thing. I see also different types of data and different media probably coming in. What do you think is going to be your order in which you onboard your data, and then how are you going to prioritize onboarding new data to Filecoin versus like making more replicas, for example, to ensure long-term reliability and access?
Okay, so I'm contacting a lot of the university at the moment and also the government. So there is actually a website on like the government provides. Not sure if there's the true. Let me check one thing. Okay, just quick sample. I'll show you the ones that. Okay. Okay, so this, I'm not sure if you can see this. So this is like one of the examples that I gathered from the official government. So sorry, this is Korean, but this is all just the data that I downloaded from the government website. So this is like the information that the government provides. What's the establishment year, what's their like business registration number and merchant name, what's the category of the name, what are they selling, their address, and where is their GPS information and so all the stuff. I have utilized these informations to graphicalize the before the previous page. So all this data is in upload from the government as a free. Like anyone can access and utilize this information. So there are like tons of information. Like I just need to ask them for application. So can I use this data? I want to make the service as a KCP and provide to my customer, and it is okay. It is just a like agreement that I need to receive. There's no payment involved, any like agreements involved. So it's really actually quite useful. This is one of the key things from the Korean government to actually make the boom of the first generation using big data and data mining and stuff. I'll show you one of the examples of the video as well. Let me check. Okay, so this is another data that I received from the Jeju Islands, not the government states. So they provided those drone like images and also those videos. So I can look up, I can put into our system and record like how many numbers car passes per day, how many people counts a day, and all this data. And store this data as a public and make some useful information from it. There's tons of information that I actually received for free. So there's those images, and also that like substantial like images. So these are the images that I have it just sliced for out my like analysis as like each was about like 5 seconds. So I have utilized and captured, and so I can do the people count and the car pass count and all this data. So there are a lot. I've been looking for this for quite a lot, and a lot of the governments and a lot of the states are quite supportive of doing this. So they are more than willing to provide data for public, as long as I can guarantee them I will do those like a mosaic for personal information, like a people face or car place and those stuff. So as long as there's those securities that pass, they are willing to give us all these images, videos, data as much as I want.
That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Very insightful. Yeah, I just want to again just give you another minute or two to see if there's any other questions in the room. Thanks so much for coming and sharing all this. I really appreciate it. To the notaries in the room, if there's anybody that would like to ask any questions, please feel free. Oh, we have a hand from Finbushi from the Notary. Go for it.
Hi, so it seems like that your platform is not ready, right? It's still like in building right now. So I'm wondering like how much DataCap you need in the like first batch to upload some data in the first place, and how much like DataCap you need after that. So we do want to know a plan of like application.
Actually, that's a really good question. So it is not built yet. For initial analysis, we will need to store some data. So I need some data to build my platform. So it won't be open to public for at least like 3 months. Calculated, it would require about 30 man-months to build. So I'm willing to put about 6-7 the developers into these projects and get it for soft launch within like 3 months. But before we launch, I need to gather as much as information as possible at the first or at early stage, so I can provide some useful information even in the early stage. So I'm guessing we'll probably like will load maybe like 50 TIV per week, maybe. So I'll contact all this like the entities and see how much information I can get at the first stage. But I'm expecting about 50 TIV per week for uploading our images and videos.
Cool. So that could be satisfied via the first allocation or even via a notary directly if that ends up being a better path. We have a hand from Eric. Go for it.
Hello. Okay, good. So can you accept the miner in China to store your data?
Sure, no problem. So my plan actually was, so I'm going to reach out for at first stage for few, maybe like 3 or 4 miners in Korea first, see how it works. I'll probably speak to them for like the offline transfer at first, and I will speak with them so if we can integrate with them like for upload like SFTP integration or PPCLI integration and all the stuff. So I'll work that out. As long as that is make some progress with that, I'll try to reach out to other region as well. So like China, America, anywhere. So because that's one of the reason why I want to start with the public data first. Actually, my ultimate goal is to utilize within our KCP system as well. But KCP's information has a lot of the personal information, like because it involves a lot of the customers' data. So at this stage, I won't be utilizing those data. So I want to use the public data first into our system. So it will be no issue to send those data to miners in China, Europe, Americas, and other regions as well, as long as we can work out how to connect safely, definitely.
Okay, that's cool. So according to this data sample, is all the data is video or only the GIF pictures?
No, actually, I will need some Excel data, the text data, GIFs, images, and videos, and those 4 types will be the major. So I'll get as much information, and I'll get it to start my platform to study based on those numbers, videos, and images.
Okay, clear. So do you need to frequent to retrieve those data? For example, like some days video which taken by the drones, and you need to retrieve it back?
Oh, I don't think it will be needed at first, early stage, but maybe after we run for a fair bit of time, we may need to have some operation policy about the retrieving data at that stage, but not for at least 3-6 months. Don't think it will be required that often to retrieve at the first stage.
Okay, understand. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Cool. Are there any other questions or any notaries that want to explicitly voice support right now? We can document and put. Of course, the LDN process itself is changing, but just while we're in a transition phase, want to make sure that we go about things as we're familiar. I don't see any more hands. Give you 20 seconds and then we'll let Tungsten go. Yeah, unless there's any other questions, notaries, feel free to look at the GitHub link that I think Galen shared earlier. Feel free to give you a thumbs up or approval there, or share it with me in chat, and I can collect them at the end of the call. If not, or in addition to that, Tungsten, thank you so much for showing up. Really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing and being willing to talk through the project. And I'm sure you'll be enabled for your first set of testing and deals pretty soon.
All right. Thanks for the invitation today. So thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
I'll be exiting the meeting now.
Yeah, sure. No problem.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other clients now that we picked this path? And we're back. All right, very good.
The recording might have stopped because he was a co-host.
Yeah, no worries. I think Senso wanted to do a quick share of what they're working on. Do you want to do that now, Galen, or do you prefer we get back to our regularly scheduled program and come to that in the open discussion?
Whichever. Senso, are you ready now? Why don't we jump through and then we'll
Sounds good. Sounds good.
check again.
There's something in the chat already. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let me stop sharing and make the co-host. Okay, Senso, you are a co-host now, so you should be able to share your screen. Okay. Let me pull up their application.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Can see and can hear.
I'm Chloe from Senso. I'm glad to have this opportunity to introduce Senso to you. First, I'll show you a video about Senso. You can watch it. Okay, let us show the pictures. This shows a typical scene of small and medium-sized cities hospital in China. It is difficult for small and medium-sized cities to obtain modern medical services, especially professional diagnosis and timely medical service. The patient data is fragmented and there is no continuous medical record which affects the diagnosis. Doctors do not have personal territory to accumulate intellectual property rights and individual branding. Okay, you can see the situation now from the left picture. Time, money, manpower has to be wasted and patients got only 3 minutes when he or she met the doctor. What we proposed is the right picture. Scheduled it online via our app to make it efficiently. Okay, we are focused on the patient's experience by leading a brand new business logic layer. Our product enables those patients upload their medical images to the Senso DAP system. The system encrypts the uploaded image data, generates a private key, and provides it to the patients. Senso DAP turns the patient's images into digital assets. Both patient data and doctor data will turn to an NFT, which is not only used for doctor diagnosis on DAP, but also traded for medical research on the digital trading platform provided by Senso. Okay, look at the whole picture. 4 parts make the business logic become a circle. Collect data, make NFT and trade. Get data via API for development and research. Community DAO for how to using those data. It is a Filecoin-based medical imaging app, which will have an online diagnosis function built-in for the patients and doctors. Okay, a same case requires more than 1,000 data samples to study and research. More than 20 PIBs capacity need to be stored with our 100 plus partner hospitals. As we all know, Filecoin network has low I/O and is not suitable for storing hot data. Medical data needs long-term tracking, investigation, and backup after treatment. They couldn't be more perfectly matched. Now we have complete about 6 features in our ecosystem with blue color. Our programmer will cooperate with other partner and work on the gray color. Patient-centered, make the cross-boundary collaboration and decrease overall cost are we final target. When doctor and patient provided their data into our network, the developer and the NFT platform can get data through Senso Gateway. On the other hand, Gateway will deliver our data to storage providers to make the data safety and stable. Meanwhile, storage provider will benefit from those data with coming retrieval market. Here is our roadmap. We have 100 plus hospitals partners now. More end users and launch donors network is our top priority this month. Okay, later I will show it to you all. Thanks all guys.
Cool, thank you so much for presenting. Just wanted to ask if before I ask any questions, if there's anybody here that has any questions for Senso and their project, or if any notaries are already aware and would like to support. And just taking a look at the application, we already have a few notaries on it. Performive, Bybase, 1475. Mr. Javazao, I think Binghe. And then I think Danny actually had a question on private patient data. And I think you already addressed it in the GitHub issue. But it might be worth just readdressing it here. So the data is okay to upload onto Filecoin. It's not like private patient data, right? Nice. Web3med.io.
Yeah, I have similar question here as well. Like medical data usually is very sensitive, and in US, Canada, or Europe, they all have something like GDPR or HPA compatible. Even Amazon, Google, they have lots of limitations to use this data. So I'm not sure in China, for example, when you apply for the storage, right? So we are asking you have different geolocation save the data. So where those data saved outside of China, or it will be limited to Chinese miner only or China miner only, because this data is assumed that it's related to Chinese patients.
Yep, it looks like we may have dropped Chloe from Senso. I know they have said in their app that it's desensitized and public, and that they can provide a sample download. I don't know if that is different when they are then storing it outside of China. I think, Charles, I think that was part of your question. So it might be good to post that in their GitHub issue and see, just to confirm, is it different for storing with storage providers in regions outside of China?
Yeah, that's a really one big concern.
Yeah, good question. Do any of our other notaries, I know like based in 1475, signed off on it? Do you have experience? Could you answer that question? Is there a different sensitivity for storing outside of China?
She's back.
Oh. We're back. Senso, we had a question from Charles, one of our notaries, about storing this information outside of China. I know you've said in the issue that the on again. We'll just follow up async, I think. Okay, let's jump through it. We have lots to cover, not a lot of time left. We're going to do this part really fast. Using GitHub discussions, we had been using everything in issues in the Notary governance repo. We're going to try out using this new platform that happens under discussions instead of issues. It can be sort of a lower lift way to start some conversations, and you can kind of increase the signal on those conversations and similarly add comments, but then my understanding is people can also reply in line to comments. And so we can get some more discussion topics going before we translate those into an issue. And we'll use issues for some of the kind of specific concrete proposals, notary applications, different process problems that like come up. So if you have an idea, have something that you've been thinking about, or just a concern that maybe isn't a specific proposal yet, and just wanted to generate some additional conversation async, let's try using that discussion forum and see how it goes. Quickly moving in, so last week, Protocol Labs and Filecoin Foundation hosted a design summit on Filecoin Plus. It's 3 days of intense, amazing strategic work. Couple of highlights. We're still working on like a total summary of everything, and we'll be able to like share out more information async. But just wanted to give some of the, the teaser information of some of the things that we were talking about and working towards, because we've heard from a lot of people that these are very top of mind questions for the program. So one was around encrypted and where we land on encrypted data and how we will be able to support encrypted data on Filecoin Plus. We talked a lot about supporting notaries doing business development for large data sets and ways in which, for example, a notary, when it's a large data set, can store a replica with themselves, and how we can sort of track that and encourage that process. For tooling, supporting the client onboarding user journey, we really want to focus on kind of consolidating some of our READMEs and documentations and work on our tool surfaces to make that very first step to getting DataCap even easier and more clear, and focusing on that kind of top of the funnel to also really minimize the overhead for notaries. And so what are the ways that we can make it much, much easier for the notaries to scale how they're doing the diligence, how they're doing the allocations, to decrease some of that tactical lift that a lot of the notaries are doing. So those are some of the high ones. Deep.
Mute button wasn't functioning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think the remaining things on the slide that we want to touch on for sure are these two sort of concepts that we've talked about a little bit in the last couple of weeks. One, especially through the issue discussion that was happening in GitHub, but also in general, just sort of as we think about the role of a notary evolving to scale with the magnitude of operations that are likely to happen on the network in the medium term and the long term. The first of these sort of tropes is like ensuring that we as a community are biasing towards action and experimentation, and sort of implied in this is also iteration, where we get to do things, learn from them, and improve them. So like the LDN process, I think, is a very good example of this, where we ran this first like phase experiment. We got a bunch of feedback from clients, and now we're going to try another experiment, and then we'll probably get a bunch of feedback, and then we'll change it again. But the idea that we can sort of keep up and continue to improve the process is very important as we work towards our goals. And so we should talk about what goals means, but in general, sort of remembering that like we are, the network is still young, we're still early, we have a lot of room to continue expanding, experimenting, and growing together to ensure that the program does indeed make the network more efficient and effective. The second of which being that we should transition from, well, at least for notaries today, where like it's a direct gatekeeping element in the flow of a client who's onboarding onto the network, where they need to go through a notary to get the required resources and the KYC to get onboarded onto the network. There are ways in which we can compensate or also collect data over time that should become part of how we decide, or how you decide technically, whether or not clients are doing the right thing or doing the fair thing on the Filecoin network for making deals. And so switching over a little bit from this element of like gatekeeping and more towards guardians as you continue to look at client behavior over time, and we as a community understand patterns, trends, and set ourselves up for backing up clients that should be verified, is I think is an important transition that we should start to make, which I think will be a key in sort of improving the client experience overall on Filecoin, because it's looking like a lot of the clients are coming through Filecoin Plus today, and it's probably going to continue being that way. And so ensuring that it's a minimal friction, both for you and for them, is probably going to be very important in the long term to ensure the sustainability of Filecoin Plus and the sustainability of the Filecoin network. Given those two things in mind, I'd love to talk a little bit about the goals as well. And so, some numbers that we were floating around that I think would be great to share with you and get your thoughts on and your feedback on, where we sort of divided up the goals into a few different categories as following. So the first being volume, where we were looking at how much DataCap. So this is a kind of difficult thing to calculate because of the way the LDN process tends to work more like a faucet. But roughly how much DataCap do we think we want to target as a community as being made available to clients in the network, right? And the network today is around 8 exabytes. It's well on its way to getting to 10 exabytes. Filecoin Plus is operating still. I think you saw the slide from Galen earlier where like the entire LDN process has applications worth 54 petabytes. And beyond that, I think through elections, we've done about 6 or 7 petabytes given to notaries. Now, of course, that hasn't even been used. That's just being given to clients. It would be great to sort of think, at a magnitude higher than we're used to together, start brainstorming at the level where, 500 petabytes needs to be shipped out to be shared with clients. It's a great sort of thing to keep in the back of our minds as we think about designs that we come up with and how they should scale. In terms of onboarding speed, that there's been an ongoing focus on TTD, which is our sort of in-house metric of time to DataCap. We look at that every week. We share that every other week. It's the top of everything on our dashboards. It's a very top of mind thing because that's the ultimate driver of the experience for a client. I think we talked about this a lot last governance call, where sort of a client coming to the network, then having to wait for a substantive period of time to be enabled leads to a very poor client experience. And so the intent is to really focus on that one and find ways to enable clients today that are coming in at a small enough scale that we think is safe to experiment with. So specifically, like, let's say that today that number is about 32 GB because that's what the auto verifier does. But I think for clients that actually need to make deals, like just being able to make a single deal usually doesn't work. And it also doesn't give the client an opportunity to prove to the network that they're here to do the right thing. And so sort of leveling that up a little bit, maybe to like 1 terabyte or something, and coming up with mechanisms or data that we think we need to collect upfront versus data that we think we can collect over time will become an interesting conversation to have to enable some of these more aggressive time to DataCap targets. Similarly, getting to a point where that first big like tranche of like an LDN application, it's like a 50 terabyte allocation, happens within a day as opposed to multiple days. I think some of these things will be directly impacted by process changes. And then some of these things will be impacted by like behavior changes that we have. And on both those fronts, I think that we're looking at the notaries as like the key sort of driver of some of these active conversations and discussions as we continue to iterate on the different processes within Filecoin Plus. There's a specific goal and desire to also have some level of risk mitigation with better dashboards and data analytics, and then generally improvements to documentation, discoverability of the programs, ensuring that clients land here when they're coming to the network, general tooling as well, and then governance processes to ensure that everyone who's attempting to participate actively is given the flow, the opportunity to provide ideas and proposals that can improve the flow, both for stakeholders in the network, such as yourselves, but also for clients that might be coming in. But yeah, I wanted to just throw this up and see how people react. Like, what do people think? Does this sound like a good goalpost to have in mind? Does this seem reasonable? Any concerns? I see there's ongoing chat about sampling retrieval from Charles. I think, Charles, do you want to share?
Yeah, it's just like as Notary, right? We recently started approving large data set, and we approved a couple of large data set. So it's different from small data set, 1 TB or 10 terabytes, because it's large. We really want to know after they store the data, how is the retrieval, or are those data still qualified? It's just like a post investigation about how everything goes well. It should be a routine work. Like during slingshot, we know that in slingshot, PR team and other teams, I'm not sure it's really just PR team, they have those bots, right, to take a retrieval. We can see that the rate is different from 0 to 100. It's quite different from different teams. So so in this case, when data set was saved to the different storage provider, we really want to know how's it going. So it's and it's also part of the guidance the guidance of the actions that we need to track those data. So maybe it's too early. Okay, I know that the ecosystem, everything is still in early stage. Maybe it's early or it's too early. But I know that some teams are working on it. I just want to know which teams are working on it. So to prevent them reinventing the wheels, so they can better cooperation together, building platform or tools, sharing libraries. So and also we can take a reference like how we can use them and a specific timeline. We know that, for example, after 2 months or 1 month, like we can start using it.
Yeah, I think so. There's two excellent ideas there. I think for the retrieval issue, that is a very interesting concept. Like you said, we have the technology, we're using it for Slingshot. I don't see a reason why we couldn't use something similar for Filecoin Plus. I think that would just be a matter of us deciding as a community that we want to use it. The code is open source. We can definitely find a way to host it if needed to have specific instances. So I think I'm very in favor and like looking at a way to sort of make that happen, because I think that should become part of our like longer term data analytics and this risk mitigation aspect, where we ensure that the clients are doing what we expect them to be doing. Regarding your second topic, I think that's also very good. I would love to hear if there are any other opinions on that. I just don't want to be the only one sharing. I see something in the chat as well. Eric, if you want to say anything. Any other reactions from others?
Yeah, I think it's just similar questions around, getting updates about retrieval and retrieval data sampling. We have 4 minutes left. I think we should hit this because we're going to be rolling these changes this week. So we've proposed these, ratified it, and just wanted to reiterate this new process flow and then show some of the tooling. So specifically, run through the process from the top. A client submits an LDN the same way in the GitHub LDN repo. The governance team and a bot will audit it for basic completeness and flag any missing, incomplete, or invalid sections directly back to the client. The bot can then automatically create the multi-sig with all of the notaries as signers with the threshold set to 2. And the bot will then also automatically propose that notary status for the multi-sig, which creates the, this is creating other issues and proposing. Then the governance team sends, a proposal message. We let the root key holders know that there's pending action for them. The bot will initiate a request to LDN for the first allocation of DataCap once that notary is created. And then 2 notaries are needed to sign. They can view the application and perform the due diligence. And then we'll post, once those 2 notaries have signed, that the DataCap is granted in the GitHub issue. Then for subsequent allocations, some additional improvements we've made. A bot will be monitoring client DataCap remaining. And once they have used 75% of their previous DataCap allocation, the bot will request an additional DataCap automatically. The goal here is for no one for these large data sets to not run out, that instead, as they get low, start the next allocation request automatically without having to wait for someone to make the announcement. The bot will also post the previous deal stats in a comment. So this will help with that audit diligence. And then notaries can perform subsequent diligence from those stats and ask any follow-up questions and sign the subsequent request. So we have a screen share video from Kiko team. I think this is about 1 minute long. So just walk through it. Again, they will submit, use a template and make sure everything's filled in. They just use like copy paste. And then the governance team will kick off that it is complete. It will automatically try and create that multi-sig. which creates another issue in that notary onboarding. Running through that application, basically gets signed and marked completed. We're going to see kind of the quick back end. As it says there, for like development, they set the threshold to 1, just like stepping through. Similarly, we get to see those message IDs. The bot will then automatically request that first allocation, logging in with that multi-sig organization. And approve that request. And we'll see that that request is approved and the labels are changed to mark that it was granted. So that's a step through that front end. And then to show briefly the other tooling. Sorry, too many tabs. I'm sure all of you can relate. This is a sample other large data set. It gets submitted. The notary is requested, allocation is requested and approved, and then the subsequent allocation is automatically requested, and the bot will post a comment pulling data from dashboards to show behavior. As you can see, maybe not the greatest example because this is all simulated data, but we think that these tools will really help the audit and speed process. So going from there, it's now 9:01. Appreciate everybody. Sorry, I think we wanted to kick it to Eric to talk about his FIP proposal. So I will stop sharing my screen and see if Eric is still available.
Hi guys. So to be honest, we haven't prepared the FIPs in English. So we just translated to English, to Chinese, because when we made the storage provider, the data provider, to ask them to help with from the storage provider to store their data, they may make confused of some concept. So that's why we make those proposal to let the people in China market to understand what are we talking about. This is our major purpose. Later, we will work on it and we will translate to English. But guys, you can see the to the FIPS which we provided on the GitHub. So mostly we would like to keep it into Chinese and to let everybody know what we are doing. And because people are make wrong different understanding about the junk data for between the real data. So the junk data, we are definite to we are using the Lotus, and the program writes the data for us. But the real data is we can see it's a pictures, it's a MP3, it's a videos on everybody's phone or computer. So those data we would like to ask them to storage into the Filecoin. So later we will keep it updated in English in GitHub. Okay,
Eric,
thanks.
I think that, thank you. I think Caitlin had to run to another meeting. I don't know if you have met Caitlin Beagle. She is relatively new with the Filecoin Foundation, helping with governance, TPM for governance. And she had some questions in the GitHub issue. And then we can get some async conversation going back and forth there. If we don't have anything else right now, sorry, I know we're running over. I'll go ahead and stop the recording Anyone else have any other open discussion topics for this call before we stop?
I just wanted to flag to this. I think we have Senso back on the call. I know Charles had the question for them around data privacy, especially as it extended. Or yeah, Charles, you want to restate your question and see if we can chat about it now? If not, we can follow up on GitHub.
Yeah, I want to say hi first to make sure they're still online.
Hi, the team from Senso, are you still here?
I think they have a network, still have a network problem. Maybe we just follow up on the GitHub.
Yeah, I think Charles, if you don't mind, I can just share the link again to the LDN app. It might be good for you to just drop it here.
Okay, great.
For 28. Cool. Any other outstanding topics, questions, concerns?
All right. Thank you all. We'll stop this recording. This will be available probably in the next few days on YouTube in conjunction with the one that we'll have this afternoon. So you can catch the recap.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Welcome to Notary Governance Meeting, September 14th, round 2. These will both be combined together with the one that happened this morning. Same agenda, different audience. In the one this morning, we did have an opportunity to see and talk to a couple different clients that have some large data set applications. So if you were not able to attend the morning call, please check it out. And if you're watching this, then you probably just watched those. So that's redundant. So jumping right in, we have a jam-packed agenda. We'll, as we usually do, go over some metrics and statistics for the program. I don't know that we have any clients that will be able to join us on this time slot. We are introducing a new mechanism using GitHub discussions. So we'll talk about that. Deep and I, along with some others from Protocol Labs and Filecoin Foundation, had a 3-day design summit last week. Some of you were able to join for some of those sessions and help share some great insights. We have some announcements from that summit, roll into some of the 6-month program goals, show some of the updated tools that we'll be launching in support of the new LDN process, and then have time for open discussion. So action-packed, we're going to jump right in. Looking at our metrics, pretty sure that as of still an hour ago, I believe that our dashboard is down. It went down sometime this morning, along with a couple other online tools, Space Gap, Phil Green, and some others. So we pulled this screen grab yesterday for the current metrics, but I believe as of right now, our interplanetary Filecoin Plus dashboard is still down. So we're troubleshooting that. We were able to update the APIs and the crawlers to get a more accurate average time to DataCap. As much as we were very excited to see this 18 minutes, and that is a reach goal for us, it is not accurate to the current reality, taking into account the different mechanisms that people have to get to DataCap. So we're seeing a more realistic 7 days. We are seeing a drop in the average time to first response from a notary. It's very exciting there. This is not a metric we really care to keep driving down. So thank you, notaries, for your work on that one. And still seeing about a similar time to DataCap allocated on chain. This one is important to us, but we definitely care about these first 2 metrics a lot more. So looking at our funnel, this again, similar to 2 weeks ago, this funnel is taking into account the DataCap that has been granted to those large data set notaries. So we have some of those 5 petabyte multi-sig notary accounts in there. In total, we are looking at 36.18 petabytes with our notaries, and then a drop down to 1.9 that has been allocated out to clients, and then 0.75 petabytes stored in deals. So this is an increase over 2 weeks ago. So happy to see that. We want to keep improving these funnel drops. Some of our direct notary activity statistics. As of yesterday afternoon, there were 57 open issues and 13 new apps. Some of these are duplicates, so just be aware. This number is 13 just at a quick glance, but we know that some of those are duplicate entries by clients. Checking the client onboarding repo for closed issues with the label state granted, we have 185 client applications. It's phenomenal. 22 in the last 14 days. Again, great work. The average clients per notary has increased. We want to keep seeing that number going up over time. And our auto verifier still cranking away, doing its great job as an outlier with 441 client approvals coming through the Glyph auto verifier. Good job to the Infinite Scroll team, chugging away. Looking at some of our large data set metrics, when that dashboard comes back online, you will see we were able to make some nomenclature changes that I think will make this a little more readable to see which of these notaries are representing those LDNs. So we now have LDN and then the issue, name, and affiliated organization. That'll help because we anticipate that the number of verified clients to those LDNs is not going to increase very much. We'll have a few that have more than one, but a lot of these LDNs will only potentially have one client, whereas our other direct notary activities will have many more verified clients. So at this time, we have 21 client applications going through that LDN process with a total of 54 petabytes of DataCap requested. Checking the metrics on those LDNs really quickly yesterday afternoon, we are seeing 742 petabytes from the LDN notaries to clients and 174 petabytes from those clients sealed into deals. So exciting metrics there. Pausing and checking our participants list. I don't see any clients. So we're going to jump ahead and talk briefly about using GitHub discussions. So this is something that we had previously been using GitHub issues for lots of things, and we are rolling out a new test that you can see in that top toolbar of GitHub discussions. We think this will allow us to start more asynchronous conversations about things that may be concerns or ideas or something that isn't necessarily quite ready to be a fully fledged issue proposal yet. So we think that orienting these around maybe a problem until it becomes a specific solution, and this will allow people to kind of reply in thread and kind of brainstorm together. And that we'll use issues for things like concrete proposals for ratification, notary applications that we continue, and different process flags. We post an issue when there's a governance call. So that's a quick thing. I know there's some people on the call here today that have brought up some different ideas in the past. We'd love to see you go create a discussion. I'm empowering you to do so. My call to action there is try to create distinct discussion threads for your different topic ideas. So as we're going to try and bias towards a few more of those discussion threads as possible, rather than maybe one giant single discussion. Okay, last week, Deep had to put up with 3 days of me in person. It was great. And we covered a lot of ground. We have been working hard at kind of consolidating and capturing all of that information and getting it into a more robust set of summary documentation. but we're just not done with it yet. So we wanted to share just some of the kind of the highlight reel from last week, to let you know that we're talking about a lot of things that have been brought up before. So for example, we had a conversation around encrypted data and what it would look like for Filecoin Plus to be able to support encrypted data. Again, these are just things that we were discussing and not necessarily things that we feel we have an answer on right now. These were just topics that came up to generate more conversation. Supporting notaries doing business development directly themselves, especially for the large data set onboarding, and some of the ideas around storing a replica with yourself if you are a notary, bringing some of those large data sets to the table, some additional tooling topics that we know that we want, and really kind of landing on focusing on the front end of how do we go from a client that discovers the Filecoin network to them getting DataCap, and focusing on that onboarding top of the funnel at this point in time. And with that, how do we, specifically minimize some of the overhead for notaries and the kind of the various tactical administrative work? How do we support making that easier to do? So that I'm going to turn it over to Deep.
Thanks, Dylan. So, I mean, one of the things that has been a general topic of conversation in this community, specifically, of course, with you folks, but also in general, like in GitHub and other places, has been sort of looking at ways in which we should redefine or evolve the ways that we're thinking about the program and how we should think about next steps, evolution, changes, etc. And there are a couple of themes that have started to emerge, and I think focusing on them and actually making them a paradigm that we use, or a primary sort of thinking framework that we use to approach general problem solving in the community, would make a lot of sense. And a lot of the conversation we were having last week sort of aligned with this as well. And two of those that are just pulled out in as bullets in this slide are, firstly, and this, Danny, you specifically called this out as well in that conversation that was happening on issue 217, but this idea that we should bias more towards action and experimentation. And sort of the unsaid third one here is iteration, where we should, knowing that we're so early, right, in the general time horizon of the network and in the general sort of scope of the program, where the network today is already at 10 exabytes, and Filecoin Plus is single-digit PB scale of deal making, the double-digit PB scale of DataCap. We have a long way to go to enable demand that comes in at an order of magnitude higher than where it's at today to be able to leverage the supply. But then also realizing that the network is only a year old. Filecoin Plus is only a year old. We have made decisions in the past together as a group that I think we have revisited and changed, and it's almost always been for the better, and we've continued to learn and improve. And so keeping that sort of at the forefront as we think about reducing the overall perceived friction to experiment or test with something, and just being a little deliberate about bounding tests as opposed to necessarily shying away from doing them, might be a really interesting sort of take and an interesting thing to keep as a core tenet of designing solutions. So I know, for example, Meg's been proposing a bunch of different ways in which notaries could engage at different levels. And instead of us spending too much time necessarily thinking about what the right levels are, a good example might be to just figure out what is the baseline way in which we can test this, and are there enough community members bought off to give it a shot? And if so, let's just give it a shot. Let's gate it maybe based on time, or in some cases the amount of DataCap that goes through, or something like that. And we can start evolving this more as a sort of experiment-based approach or iteration-based approach, so that we can continue to evolve with the network. Because it's also likely that the shape and the nature of Filecoin Plus is going to continue to change drastically, right? Given that we're probably in decimal points of the time horizon of this program or the impact of this program, we have a long ways to go. And so not falling into the trap. And I've been particularly, I've made this mistake myself a lot, is what I'm trying to say, where I often think about if we have established something and it seems to be working, it could be better. So then I start thinking about ways in which the currently established process could be improved, as opposed to actually just stepping back and saying, what are we actually trying to solve for? We do have the buffer to experiment. We do have the opportunity to do things completely different and give them a shot. So just want to encourage all of you as well, and let this serve as a reminder that like together as a community, we are capable of doing awesome things, and we have to actually do awesome things to ensure that we can enable client success and minimize friction to onboarding onto Filecoin in general. And then the second one, which I think you've heard from me and from others, and from Meg in her post and other people on GitHub as well, this idea that we should think of the notary role itself transitioning from being like a gatekeeping role to being a guardian role. We've used a few different terms. I think watch persons, watch dogs, watch, like also like sort of observing kind of terms are being used. But I think guardian sounds nice. It's got the alliteration, but also it adds this idea that like, we as a community of Filecoin Plus are kind of like the stewards of legitimate client demand on the network. And so defining what that means, enabling the experience for clients, ensuring that they're successful in the long term is like part of our longer range responsibility. And that should be an exciting like challenge for us. Like that's the whole point of being in this room, is that you are all individually high leverage stakeholders and what the medium to long term path for a client to onboarding onto the network could look like. And so yeah, Galen in the chat likes to call this the data capacitor role, because you're giving DataCap and you're a defo data capacitor. Pretty funny. But yeah, in general, sort of instead of like feeling like we need to put you in a position where you're only getting to do this like upfront due diligence and upfront gatekeeping of access to the network, we should think about like balancing out like what we can do upfront with regards to interaction with the client, but also enabling the client, and then what we can do over time. And combining those two things into getting a much more holistic picture of what is considered like fair use of the network, or good behavior on the network, or reasonable usage of DataCap, or like all these different like facets of the same thing, which is really, is this client using Filecoin properly? Are they able to leverage the technology that we're all building in this community? And is it actually helping them serve their needs? And ensuring that they're doing that in a way that is safe and fair and reasonable. And doing that by not just looking at like their background and what maybe their plans are, but then also looking at the execution on the network, which of course is going to influence the way in which we think about tooling, about auditing, about how DataCap might move, whether or not DataCap is a reversible construct. Like I know there's a bunch of FIPS that have floated around, and so just sort of thinking a little bit more about like the longer term implications of what it means to be put in a position where it's like some amount of upfront work, and then some amount of longer term work, and then utilizing software to make that as easy as possible and give us as holistic a picture as possible to serve effectively as guardians of the network, of the program, etc. And bearing that in mind, we also try to set some sort of targets. So like metrics that I think, metrics is probably a better word, but like things that we can work towards as a community in like the near term. And so probably on the next slide, we should discuss the different parameters. Gillen, want to give me that next slide? Thank you very much, sir. So these are some that we decided we'd like to propose to the group, and I would love to hear your reactions. But this is like on a few different parameters, the first of which is volume. Volume being like, what is the total amount of DataCap actually being made available to clients? And that number that we thought might be good in like a 6-month-ish range might be 500 petabytes. To give you a scope of what that means, that actually means about 10xing the program in the next 6 months, which is an order of magnitude above. But as we bear in the principles of the previous slide, it doesn't actually seem like that much, because from the lens of like how much supply there is available in the network, we should be striving towards ensuring clients can store a large amount of data, significant amount of data successfully on the network. Speed, which at least personally, I think this is the one that probably matters more in the near term. You're all familiar with TTD. For those of you that aren't familiar, it stands for time to DataCap. That's become like a sort of internal metric in this program, where we think about how quickly a client actually receives DataCap and can be enabled to make deals on the network. And today, that tends to happen in 3 ways, right? You have like this automated verification, which is like 30 seconds, and you get 32 GB. Then you have like this middle ground of being in touch with a notary, and then depending on the responsiveness with that notary, you get DataCap of like tens of petabytes. And then we have this LDN path, which is massive amounts of DataCap, could take weeks to do the validation. Of course, we're doing separate work there via issue 217 and the proposal to try and make that faster, to speed that up. But we were just thinking in general, like in terms of giving a client an opportunity to actually get moving as fast as possible, and then also get to demonstrate to the group, whether that's the group of notaries or the community at large, that what they're doing is reasonable and fair use of DataCap. We should allow them to be enabled, perhaps with a lower bar up front, with more strict sort of auditing and risk mitigation practices. And so we wanted to propose like time to DataCap along two sort of dimensions, where you have this one like below 1 TB range, which is potentially like risk safe, or we do enough work together on like upfront KYC plus audit tooling, et cetera, such that we feel like it's a safe enough number for a client to go and get that kind of DataCap in a very short amount of time, say less than an hour. And then for like the next sort of order of magnitude up, we talk about getting people in about a day. And that could mean improving processes in addition to also investing in tooling. Of course, we also try to talk a little bit specifically as well about like supporting aspects of the program, like improving documentation, improving discoverability of the program, given that it seems to be like most clients are now coming in via Filecoin Plus onto the network, so ensuring that like they're actually able to get here efficiently, effectively, understand the purpose of the program and leverage it. Tooling that's built not just for the program itself and the notaries, but also for clients. So the experience of going to the Filecoin Plus app to apply for DataCap, like investing in that a little bit to improve the overall client onboarding experience. And then of course, investing in governance processes to ensure that like we ensure that ideas are proposed, but also individuals feel enabled or feel supported in their ability to actually push things across the finish line, like ratify proposals and actually get them moving, as opposed to just constantly discussing for extended periods of time until we arrive on like some sort of consensus. And so just learning how to work together more efficiently and going back to these principles of wanting to experiment and iterate, enabling us to be able to do that with less friction over time. Yeah, I wanted to pause and just hear reactions. I would love to hear if you think these seem reasonable, not reasonable, ideas for other things we should be thinking about as a community, and any other thoughts you might have.
I think it's ambitious, deep. It's making it, but we should have a crack.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if these are easy. I don't think they're easy at all, but I think that I think they're almost indicative of like, again, like design principles in some ways, where it's like we should operate knowing that this might be a magnitude of order we want to reach. And if it happens in like 7 months, 8 months, that's less material. It's more that we built a system that scales to ensuring that that could have happened, right?
Yeah.
One element of 500 PB is that like demand also needs to show up to ask for 500 PB of DataCap. And that's a whole different problem, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what I see in the chat as well. Like, how can we get enough applications? I think that's a great question. I think implicitly what this means is that we're also making it a point to enable better business development for individuals in the ecosystem, whether that's miners or notaries or even other stakeholders, like reducing friction and barriers for them to feel like they can make it easy for their clients to come and get DataCap. And I think Galen, you touched on this briefly before, but I do think that becomes like a implied like priority kind of thing. But yeah, I see a lot of reactions to 500 being bold. Feel free to unmute. I've talked plenty. Or Meg, if you have any other follow on, please go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was also going to say to the 500 petty as like a bold reach goal, and like a couple other things to like call out and as reminders as we think about these not necessarily as 500 petabytes of unique data. And so thinking about how we can also, support and encourage clients that are coming to us to have best data replication practices. And so we've seen some LDNs come in that say, we want to store 2 to 3 copies of our data set, and maybe finding ways to like help encourage them to have greater geographic distribution and more replicas can also help, drive these numbers up. And that doesn't have to be limited to those very large data sets, finding ways to, as we work directly, with some of those smaller and medium-sized clients doing the same thing. But yeah, we also think that this is a big, bold direction and a reach goal. Danny?
So I get this is all great and really fits kind of what I think would be a fantastic kind of move for the whole process. I'm just sort of mulling over external groups that maybe would be able to help us in this. Like I feel like we're trying to solve a lot of very unique problems, but maybe they have sibling problems that other people are trying to solve. And I'm sure if you've thought of this, the two that sort of spring to mind here are just KYC, in that a bunch of what we're trying to do is to do a really fast and efficient and easy KYC process, particularly if we move to going to a guardian role, right? Because what we really want to do if we're in a guardian role is make sure those people don't just come back and do it again, right? And the other part of it that I was thinking about is like, what after we've onboarded, like a lot of these clients, you know, are trying to problem solve, and we should really have a way, maybe, or a way of directing them to resources and third parties that can help them put up that kind of data. And I'm sure they're working on it as it is. But I do feel in some ways we kind of sign off on the process and then just leave them. And I'm not saying that we should be, you know, following them through the whole life cycle of it. But I do think that maybe there's a way that we can go, and your next step is to talk to these people and these people and these people. And so they come away feeling like they know what to do next, which gives them a better feeling about the whole process. That's it.
Yeah, we had some like short ideas around some of that, of like what are some other ways, a couple of things of like who could we be talking to around, you know, best auditing practices and like watch, you know, fraud watch kind of tooling and metrics. And so we'll be putting out a, you know, probably using a discussion topic to like see who in our community has some like good people for us to talk to. But then what are other, you know, ways that we can look for other examples of like how people do KYC and that sort of diligence process. And then also a question that has come up a few times from storage providers is how do we support storage providers doing more of their own outreach to verified clients? And so a near-term proposal that we're thinking about is putting in the DataCap application a little checkbox where a client can say, I would like to opt in to communications from storage providers, and then basically put that list in front of storage providers to say, you know, here are clients that are getting DataCap that would be willing to hear from you, and maybe that's just another way that we can help scale our impact of what you're talking about, Danny, of kind of sealing the deal once they've got the DataCap in hand. I think XA Matrix, you had a hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Galan. Can you hear me? Okay. The thing is that I think there aren't nearly enough applications for notaries like us. And I guess things that we do to lower the barriers for the applications and notaries to deal with all these things are very good. But still, how to increase the application amounts? Does this proposals directly lead to the increase in the amounts? And I'm putting a doubt here. And as for the vertical field, since most notaries, as I know, have some sort of basic knowledge towards IPFS, Filecoin, and I'm wondering if it's possible for us to introduce and invite some enterprises in certain fields and educate them or bring out some benefits to make them becoming one of the stakeholders in our network. Like we do some active work to invite more people to join us. And in the same time, we should do all this like work to improve our networking. And that's the point. I want to know that if we can do something to improve the actively invitation to these organizations and enterprises in certain fields. Yeah.
I have some thoughts, if you don't mind, Galen. So I think your point on needing to scale like the group of notaries itself is extremely accurate. Like I think that like for sure we need to find a way to make that role both a little easier, but also better supported and at a higher scale. And so that is something we should actively think about. I don't think that there's an easy solution to this, but maybe it means reducing the application difficulty, for example. Or today, so the last notary elections, right? There were roughly 65 applications, out of which I think 52, 53 ended up being like legit, properly filled out, all the info was there. And out of that, like 22, I think, became like net new notaries. And so that's like a, more than 60% drop off rate in between like where we are to where we want, who applied to who actually was accepted as a notary. And that was mostly because of like limitations that we were putting in place as a community on how much DataCap we wanted to see circulated and like how notaries had been performing in the past. But if we're thinking about scaling up, right, that was still like 5 petabytes in total, like DataCap being given to like notaries, let alone being given to clients. And now we're talking about 500 petabytes. So I think definitely something needs to change there. The other thing I wanted to call out though was we're also looking at the LDN process as I think like an experiment of how a lot of Filecoin Plus could run too, right? Because we have this mechanism whereby you now have a set of notaries that are responsible, that are acting as like sort of watchkeepers, guardians of a particular client who's onboarding onto the network. That client is receiving DataCap at like orders of magnitude beyond what we've ever seen before, right? Like 5 petabytes plus. Sure, they're getting dispensed at like a rate that's much lower and gated, but that's part of what makes it feasible for notaries to serve as guardians. And they get their 5 petabyte allocation. We have like currently 7, soon to be like 23 notaries like watching it and getting updated reports. What could we have done if we had 30 notaries or 40 notaries, or even with 20 notaries, what could we have done if the client got 20 petabytes to begin with? Because say they had 5 petabytes of data, but they needed to store 5 replicas of it. So it actually is not that far away from where we are. I think it's just a matter of sort of learning how we can scale what we have, plus redesigning some of these things in innovative ways to ensure that we reduce the burden on both notaries and clients. I think Danny had this excellent point on sort of one main thing we're effectively doing is KYC. And so there's a lot of organizations out there that do KYC, even in our like Web3 world, even like things like exchanges that have like a KYC process that then limits how many transactions you can make, for example, or how much money you can move in and out of an exchange. It's not that different from us saying, oh, here's an onboarding flow from a client that we all sort of agree on as a group of notaries. And like notaries set policies and clients comply with those policies upfront with like X amount of time of investment. And then after that, it just becomes a matter of like watching how that client like operates over time. So I think that's definitely part of it. Then there's this other side of scale, which is clients that actually need DataCap. Today, if you look at the DataCap that's available, not counting the LDN, right? Like just looking at notaries, there's something like 8-ish petabytes with individual notaries. And out of that, like I think only about 30% has been given to clients per like Galen's slides at the start of this. That's bringing in more clients in and of itself, I think becomes like a pretty interesting problem where not only do I think you're absolutely right in that we should be probably doing some investment in education and bringing in these clients to the network and showing them ways in which they can participate, but also I think there's this aspect of just like us providing feedback to the underlying implementations, or us ensuring that the experience that we're building for clients is as low friction as possible, so that those clients' stories, testimonies can compound on each other and increase the general network effect that exists towards moving towards Web3 technologies or moving towards Filecoin as like your storage solution of choice. And so I think there's a few different like parameters that we can use to optimize this. And then there's just the general BD stuff. And I know Meg just proposed in the chat, right, like having like an actual market assessment that the notaries can like party on together and get behind and rally BD efforts behind for people that are interested in engaging in that way. That could lead to some really interesting insights on how we choose to prioritize our time as a community for the BD work that we would like to do to bring net new clients into the ecosystem, or net new companies that could graduate to leverage this ecosystem that we're building together. And then again, like scaling these things down a little bit, like 500 petabytes sounds like a massive number, but the moment you're like, oh, a legitimate client probably needs 5 different replicas or something, now you're down to 100 petabytes, and Filecoin as a network is already at like 20, 30 petabytes of data being stored. We're not that far away. I think it's more a matter of reducing the friction, educating folks, ensuring that we do things in like a deliberate and targeted manner, and invest the time upfront to align ourselves in certain directions, and then actually get to execute together. And so I think I'm pretty excited for this like next few months, like I think period of how we'd be able to achieve these things together. I think there's already a bunch of ideas floating around. I think there's many more ideas to come, and I would love to sort of encourage you to turn whatever you have into a discussion on GitHub, so that we can then bring in even more community members and rally them around these concepts and thoughts. Yeah. Cool, I said enough. Sorry, anybody else want to respond, react, share?
I think Deep just, yeah, that all makes sense. We do need to uplift, like Exen is right, we do need to uplift the supply, the demand side. So we're building supply. There's one thing I suggested in the longer term with you guys last week. I didn't put it in the channel. I think we could really benefit from an end-to-end journey map, and it plots everyone in that. So all of us that have a role, and it also maps the interaction. So KYC tools and CRM and how we're all doing it. There'll be some layer of that will be universal, and then each member of the community can adapt their own flavor. So I think it's probably worth doing that. And it might be something that comes out of the market assessment. We're going to have a chat to Clara maybe later this week about it. So I think it's probably worth doing that sooner rather than later.
I think there's a couple of other thoughts in the chat. I think, Neo, you dropped a link to discussion. If you want to chat about it or share any thoughts right now, floor is yours. If not, we could probably proceed to the next sort of topics of discussion as well on the agenda. Okay, I guess okay to proceed.
All right, kicking this back over to me, shifting gears from some of the high-level strategic conversations and pulling it back down to where we kind of are tactically. Some LDN tooling updates. We are increasing automation. So these are some of the things that are landing with the issue 217. So just wanted to like run through this list again, and then we have a recorded screencast from Kiko showing this in testing. So process for first allocation. This shouldn't be news to anyone, but just like make sure we're on the same page. Client submits their LDN application still in the same GitHub repo. Governance team and the bot will audit that for basic completeness, but not due diligence. We can flag any missing or incomplete sections back. The bot will create the multi-sig with all of the active notaries as signers and threshold set to 2. From there, the bot can automatically in that other repo propose notary status for the multi-sig. The governance team can send a message in either a Slack DM or some alert message to the root key holders. They can then sign and grant that notary status. Once that happens, the bot can automatically request the first allocation. This is another thing that we've seen some of that slowdown back and forth of not knowing when the root key holder step had completed. So we can automate that process. The bot will initiate that first request. The two notaries at that time can view and perform the due diligence before signing and get a DataCap granted message in the GitHub issue. From there, for subsequent allocations, this is another exciting thing. We have a bot that can monitor DataCap at client addresses to be able to then, once they have hit a threshold amount, go ahead and initiate their subsequent allocation. One of the things we have been kind of made aware of, we don't want to have happen where a client is chugging along through their DataCap allocation and then runs out due to just a timing issue or something happening, an error in the process. So if we can kick off that automated subsequent allocation when they are at a certain threshold level, we think this will help. The bot can also post some previous deal stats as a comment. So this can help with some of that auditing that we're doing right now, somewhat more manually, but we can help put it in there for the notaries to see at a glance in the GitHub issue. Notaries can then perform diligence based on that comment if they need to ask any questions or pause for any reason. And then again, two notaries can sign the subsequent allocation requests. So to see it in action in testing, we're saying we still start at the same place in that GitHub repo to submit using the template. Bot is auditing that to check for any missing sections, and then the governance team can kick it over to create the multi-sig, which opens similar to now in another repo for creating the notary, which is then going to automatically send that proposal message to the root key holders. You can see signing in here in this testing process with just a threshold of 1. Our root key holder process will still have a threshold of 2. Approving the root key holder status, where we'll then get the message back and change the labels to being added. And then we can see in that LDN issue, that first allocation request, notaries being able to sign in as today as an organization using that multi-sig to then see the large request and grant DataCap. Once that goes through, we see that the request was approved and changing the label to granted. Process complete, smiley face. So I wanted to take a second and show you as well a sample. Again, this is in the testing repo. Once that multi-sig is requested, it gets created, an amount of DataCap is requested. We are then imagining that they have used up a threshold of DataCap, and the bot will then automatically kick off that subsequent allocation to the multi-sig address, or from the multi-sig address, sorry, to the client address. And then the bot will pull this stats page. So this is looking at our dashboard to see basically previous deal behavior. We think this can be a really helpful, quick at-a-glance view to support the audit. As you can tell here, this is test data, so not the most accurate. So jumping from that, we were going to take it to open discussion. So we heard a lot about the different goals, but at this point, we'll see if there are any show of hands about other top of mind issues, questions about that LDN tooling update, or other questions about the summit or program overall. Go for it, Bing. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, Bing here, please go for it.
Hello, everyone. Now that notary is not full-time, clients can't know how when they spend online. And I saw that reducing application time is a good way to attract clients. Maybe we need to change the way of submitting an issue on GitHub into a more real-time docking application method. Clients can choose to apply for notary online and complete the application in a short time. That's my point.
Yeah, I think if I understood that correctly, that makes sense. I think having like some sort of process by which like the amount of effort that a client puts in might be correlated with the amount of data cap that they get, or with what they're enabled to actually do on the chain might be like an interesting approach where, sometimes clients don't actually need that much data cap to get unblocked immediately, or don't actually need that many deals to do their POC or their first test on the network. And so finding ways in which with very little effort from them and very little effort from a notary, we can get them unblocked is interesting. Like our response to that today is like a 32 GB auto verifier, but 32 GB is just one deal. Like that doesn't really let a client do anything, and it doesn't really allow us to gather data on what that client would have done if they had more data cap. And so maybe we look into like more complex, but still auto verification at a slightly higher scale. That could be interesting, where like without human, like specific human intervention, like we do auto verification at a higher degree where clients are immediately unblocked or something. Is that sort of in line with what you were talking about, or is there something else?
I think that was also what I was understanding as well. I think we've also heard from a number of people that GitHub is not the easiest place to start. Also geographic issues in certain areas where GitHub is blocked or not available. And so thinking about other ways that we can have tooling. There's always this balance between like the Filecoin Foundation building all of the tooling and owning all of it, and then it becoming very centralized versus trying to lean towards keeping things open source and keeping things more platform ambivalent or agnostic, and ways in which we can kind of walk that line to support notaries having their own platforms and processes while also maintaining transparency. So that is like a tension that we try and call out.
I have a separate hand. This is to directly respond to Meg's prompt in Slack, but also in general, sort of like rehashing your slide earlier, Galen, on using GitHub discussions. Just want to ask, not to put Meg on the spot. Meg, do you feel like for those 3 topics that you proposed in Slack, are you comfortable starting each of those off as like a separate GitHub discussion? Because I think that individually worthy of that. Or would you have rather the opportunity to hash that out further in Slack or hash that out further in a governance call before taking it to like a written format on GitHub?
I think to follow it through GitHub is fine, and it's an experiment, so we can have a go and see how they work out. So why don't we start with that? Maybe this forum is a good place to sort of present a 1-page or like a 2 to 3 minute, like this is the topic, let's vote, let's move forward kind of thing. So that might be another way to accelerate making decisions.
Yeah, I think the mental model that I have in my mind is basically that, like, discussion serves as like the asynchronous version of like what this room could have been had we like, say you liked us better and we all wanted to hang out a lot longer, which clearly I don't think is the case, especially for Galen. I mean, as a result, we end up using GitHub and writing these things. And then I think Galen is pitching discussions as an alternative to issues because it allows for like threaded responses, which I think makes a ton of sense. And so we get to do all that stuff like async. And then we have this slide right now that was up that said open discussion, right? Which is where maybe this is the point at which we say, oh, I wrote this discussion topic, here's the responses, or let's have more synchronous conversation on that stuff. And then once like that is more like problem oriented conversation. Like let's identify the different approaches to solve a problem. Let's understand the problem, get on the same page about the direction. And then once like we actually start moving towards solutioning and like specific proposals, that to me is like you have an issue. And then we should have a dedicated part in this gov call where we should have addressed those issues and done like the mechanics of like voting, agreeing, disagreeing, like earlier on in this call, had there been any issues to have been addressed. And so that's kind of what I'm imagining we're going to try doing. Is that sort of, does that map right to you, Galen and Meg and others? Does that sound about, okay, cool. Sweet. Danny looks very happy with us. Awesome.
I am. I'm happy with you all.
Great. Any other topics or thoughts before we close out for today? This is action-packed call. Lots of topics we covered.
I do look. I just have one operational one about. I think it's Filecoin. It's sort of. I might just connect with you guys after where we go with that next.
Is it stuck waiting for root key holders?
It's been a long thread. Yeah, I'm just not sure where to go with it next.
Okay.
I think it was technically at 6 notaries signed on to Filecoin, but as we land issue 217 and implement it, it will roll into a LDN with all the notaries and a threshold of 2, just like all of the, we will be rolling all of the existing LDNs that are previously approved or currently submitted to multi-sigs with a threshold of 2.
Okay, well, that's good. I think it was more about the dialogue. I'm going to Slack it to you after this and just have a look.
Yeah, feel free to do it in the notaries channel
notaries
as well.
channel.
Yeah, +1.
Okay.
Great.
Awesome.
If there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and stop the recording.
Hello, YouTube.